Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. I am your host, Jay Goninen. Today, I am really excited to have Danny Combs, founder of Teaching the Autism Community Trades, also known as TACT, on the podcast. Danny is a fourth-generation woodworker and mechanical tinkerer who grew up making stuff with his family. Eventually, he followed his own path and went to Nashville to play music. His vibrant career included various platinum albums with Grammy and Oscar-winning recording artists, and after 10 years in the music industry, he began cultivating his passion for education. His love for teaching led to teaching private lessons and running the music program at an inner-city high school. He was granted several awards in teaching and became a published educational author, arranger, and songwriter. He has two incredible children, Dylan and Ellie. When his son Dylan was diagnosed with autism, Danny formed TACT to help other kids like his own learn different skilled trades. Danny, just an incredible path. Really, really excited to talk to you today. I think this is a topic that is fascinating to me. And as we go through this, I'm sure my naivety will kind of come out. But appreciate you joining us and look forward to talking about everything autism today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I've been really looking forward to this. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, the music side is something that's really interesting to me. What kind of music were you playing?
That's a good question. So everything from country to Christian to fingerstyle guitar music, doing a whole bunch of fun stuff. And I ended up having a music degree in classical guitar. So if you get a chance to meet me in person, I still have the long fingernails on one hand. It's not just because I'm weird. I mean, kind of unique, I guess, but still do the finger picking beside me. Still my vintage little Martin here. So still very, very much enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So all over the map, but the fingerstyle classical stuff, that was really my jam. I love that kind of stuff.
In Nashville, right? Just the mecca of music in so many ways. How was it being kind of a part of that music community in Nashville?
It was just amazing. I mean, it almost seems like a dream in so many ways. And it was such a great lesson for me in life. And so much of that experience in Nashville I've taken with me in my professional career here, even doing the nonprofit and working with kids with autism. I was very fortunate when I first got there, knew some people that were pretty amazing. Went for the shortest interview of my life where I sat down with this man and he says, "Oh, you were recommended by, X person." That was my friend. And he says, "That person says you're, a good guy. Is that true?" And it's like, how do you answer that question like in an interview? And I've never been asked that question since. So it's like, yeah, I like to think so. And he's like, "Great, you're hired." And like, it was that quick.
Wow.
And what I really discovered there in Nashville was like the personality piece and who you were as an individual really played a big role for it, where the people that were genuinely amazing, and there are so many amazing individuals in Nashville that got the gigs and were playing all this amazing stuff, you never would have known it. Like, it's not like they were, wearing it on their shirt, like saying, "Hey, I'm an A-list Nashville session guy" or something. It was just very modest, very humble. They went and did their thing. They valued their families. And the people that, came that had a lot of chops, a lot of skills, that were maybe trying to break in or didn't recognize that, were telling you how great they were. And they were like, "Oh, I'm the best. Look what I can do," and showing off. And they were. They're amazing. I mean, no doubt. There were a whole bunch of guys that are way better than me. And the thing was that people didn't really like to work around that, right? Like, nobody really, in my experience, likes to work around that person that's telling you how great they are all the time. That's not really that fun. You want to work in a community that recognizes everybody has talent and build each other up and support each other and kind of join on that journey together. And Nashville really taught me that. And it's been so valuable here. TACT is so relationship based. I mean, the reason all of this has been built is relationships, getting to know amazing individuals and listening to them, learning about them, and then finding ways of supporting and working with them.
A lot of people might not put together why we're doing a podcast about autism. And as those that are listening out there might struggle to understand it, we're going to explain how it relates to the automotive field, how it relates to the diesel field here in just a little bit. But what drove this for you in the passion for awareness with autism and then the training side around autism came when you had your son, right? And really trying to draw awareness to it. Explain to us how that journey's been with your son and being introduced to this when maybe you weren't familiar with it to start with.
Man, it's been a journey that now 1 in 36 families go to. And I think that's an understatement of how many families it is. It's quite a bit. So I'm guessing the listeners here know somebody that has autism, is autistic themselves, or in some way is around it. So when my son was first diagnosed, it was down at Vanderbilt, down in Nashville. And it's honestly not the news that you want to hear. I mean, the framework about it, especially since 14 now, means this is a decade plus ago, was not very positive. And it's still, a lot of people in the community very deficit based around it. There's still a lot of misunderstanding about what it is. And it's a spectrum, so it's a wide range of things. So when you hear those words, your mind immediately goes to one end or the other. But it's not this linear thing. Nothing in life exists like that. But still, it's been framed like that, and especially was over a decade ago. And didn't know much when I first started about autism itself. Did happen to have, like you had read in my bio, master's in education. So knew more than most, but definitely it's growth, right? I mean, there's lots to learn. And so when I started really researching everything and learning, oh my God, it's the highest unemployed group in the country, 90% unemployment rate, which by the way hasn't changed. And ADA is 33-esque years old this year, I think. Was it 1990 it was password-esque? And there's handrails now everywhere. There's Braille, there's ramps. All those are amazing. Employment stats for kids with autism or disability has not changed at all. And so seeing what that looked like, and then starting to experience the cost. And in Tennessee, man, we were paying like $10,000 a month, a decade ago, of just occupational, behavioral therapy, gross motor, fine motor, physical therapy, speech therapy. I mean, all of these different things, and you're going through all these tests. And I was, more fortunate than some that, had the means to swing those kind of things and actually provide those opportunities for my son. But at some point, you're in those waiting rooms, and all you're hearing is what's wrong with your child. And your own kid, and there's amazing things about them. And it's like, my son could do incredible things, even though he wasn't, able to say, hello, Dad, I love you. He was making these amazing things and visualizing and conceptualizing. And when I grew up in a family of tradesmen, my kid played with scissors. Like, I right or wrong, I mean, like, he was out in the garage working with Dad. I mean, I always had a vintage car or two or three I did upon at the time that I was tinkering on. And he was always out there working with me, and it became very apparent that he was very good at it, and started recognizing, okay, this is a strength of his. Like, I get what these therapists are saying, and they're doing God's work. I mean, they're amazing people, not to put any kind of therapist down at all, but there's amazing strengths, and seeing those and recognizing, okay, how can I support him on those strengths? And so I started, developing the idea of TACT, which is still the only organization like this in the country that works with skilled trades and autistic individuals, which blows my mind in 2023 now that we're still the only ones doing this. And had the chance to meet Dr. Temple Grandin, and your listeners haven't listened to Dr. Grandin speak. She is just an incredible individual. She's, Time Magazine, 100 most influential people of all time. She developed the machines that turns cows into hamburgers. She does all kinds of cool stuff. And I told her about my idea, and she's like, you need to put down your guitar and go do this right now. And whatever reason, that the mood I was in, she caught me at that moment. It was like, okay, when Temple tells you to do something, you do it. And in 7 years since we've done that, TACT has grown to become the most successful training to transition to employment organization in the state of Colorado. By and large, our state has a 12.2% success rate, getting kids jobs, and not just jobs, but careers. TACT has an 83.3%.
Wow.
And it's been amazing that we've had these different auto manufacturers now recognize, again, the strengths and talents of our kids. And Toyota sponsors our program, Subaru sponsors our program. Right after this, I'm meeting with Mitsubishi because they work with us as well. All of these really great bigger companies are starting to say, like, hey, we recognize that there's this giant pool of people that we've completely overlooked that have a lot of talent. And it feels like there's a moment now where people are starting to recognize that perhaps some of the stigmas and generalizations and stereotypes that they had heard about autism might not be as accurate as they had believed in the past. And, they may have overlooked, where innovation and creativity and diversity of thought, and especially with all these businesses now hiring our graduates. And that's the goal, right? Is to kind of break this chain and create that independence for somebody to have a bright future of their choice. Is all of these businesses are recognizing, like, hey, for the last 50 years, we've asked the same interview questions in the same format, and we're not getting creativity, we're not getting innovation, we're struggling with retention, our HR costs are through the roof. And it's kind of just like this elephant in the room. It's like, man, if you're looking for all of these things, why are you going about it the same way? Isn't that the definition of insanity? And so by us showcase, and we let the kids' talent speak for themselves. I mean, it's work-based interviews. When the car dealerships started coming, even before Toyota and Subaru proper joined us, they would come out and watch the kids, and they would see them changing oil and rotating wheels and doing it on a variety of different cars. They were generalizing and like actually able to problem solve and figure out all of these different things that, a lot of times, not to put other tech schools down. I love tech schools. There's 603 in Colorado. We're the only one that works with kids with autism. I mean, they're doing amazing stuff too. But teachers, by and large, I think, are put in a really tricky situation. If you have 30, 60 kids in a class, my gosh, how are you supposed to teach every kid every part of an engine or a suspension or problem solving, a computer? That's tricky, man. So I think the way that we're doing is really giving kids the attention they need and helping them be successful.
How much of this comes down to maybe a misperception of what autism is, or maybe a misunderstanding?
I think a fair bit. I mean, it's hard. It is. I mean, let's be real. I mean, I'm speaking about it in very bright terms and strengths based because that's the way I think it should be. But there is still, struggles that come with it. And, our kids, by and large, a lot of times, if they're 20, 30 years old, they've been hearing what they've been doing wrong their entire life. And autism or not, you meet an adult that's been told what they're doing wrong for the last 20, 30 years. There are barriers that come with overcoming that and getting them to believe in themselves again. And so, I mean, there is a piece of it that is autism. It's a piece of the communication stuff, like you were talking about. I mean, by and large, the whole notion of American education was meant to bell curve hit the dead center, and like those outliers that are on the sides, they're not getting served. I mean, there's a reason, a decade or 2 decades ago, we would call it special education or gifted programs. Special education qualifies for the extremely academically gifted and those that need a little bit more support. So it's like you would have in the same room, the Albert Einsteins with 160 IQs, and then the kids with IQs of less than 70, because that was the broad brush where they were just aiming for the middle. So I think as, we move on and we learn, what supports need to be in place to enable everybody to be successful, the brilliance of like what we're doing and the universal design behind it is what works for our kids works for everybody. It's not like what we're teaching our kids is something special and unique. It can be taught to neurotypical kids too, and they'll be more successful from it. It's just reframing and looking at it from a different perspective so that everything isn't kind of misconceived. Because by and large, our kids don't understand, or they are very literal, and painting broad brushes here again, but they will take everything at face value. So you need to be very specific when you're talking to our kids on what we're doing, right? If you're putting on a wheel and you're like, tighten those lug nuts. Well, geez, what does tighten mean? Who's Titan? My Titan? Your Titan? Right? I mean, that's where we could get into like being just specific. And that's the great thing about things like auto mechanics, where it's like, man, I need you to put the torque wrench, let's pretend it's a vintage Volkswagen, you got 80 pounds of torque. So you're being specific in your direction. I need you to put on these at 80 pounds of torque. Our kids will rock that all day. If you use general terms of just make it tight, I don't know what that means.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like we have to learn that kind of language. And I think everybody benefits from that, because even there's so much anxiety among everybody, right? If you're working for an employer and they're like, hey, I need you to have this done by the end of the day. Well, shoot, whose end of the day? My end of the day? Is that 4 o'clock? Because you sometimes leave early to go pick up your kids from school. Does that mean before you pick up your kids? You know what I mean? Like there's just the specificity of including direction in language that really help our kids excel. And it's not hard to do that. And it really just alleviates in anybody so much anxiety that takes place.
So let's talk about what autism actually is. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we talked about maybe misperceptions or just maybe a simple misunderstanding of what it is, but can you explain to us what is autism, and then maybe we can dive into the spectrum itself at some level as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, by and large, and mind you, I'm not the doctor of psychology that studies this stuff, but I mean, that has that degree to make that diagnosis. But the textbook definition would be that it's a deficit. They would look at it from a deficit perspective, saying that it is usually and it can be associated with an intellectual or developmental disability. And that it usually means that within that, if you look like a pie chart of a person, that there would be peaks and valleys, that there would be during their tests at least 4 or 5 of those deficits that would be significant enough that they would require a variation of extra supports and anything from frustration tolerance to executive functioning to gross and fine motor skills to communication to perception to sensitivity, a variety of things like that. And so that's why you have individuals that are autistic that might use alternative forms of communication through an iPad, or it might be very sensitive to sound, or at least they're told they're very sensitive to sound, which is what we find a lot. To the other end of it, where they're quite literal, brilliant academically, almost twice gifted, to the point of, doing math of orbital mechanics in their head or something crazy. I mean, it's kind of that broad brush, and it's hard to, in the sense that because they haven't been able to quantify it with this like direct, medical diagnosis, despite it being a medical diagnosis, it's made it very difficult, where now 14 states have educators that have the ability to diagnose people with autism, where they're noticing these deficits and it's fitting a lot of other things in these broad brushes. So within neurodiversity in itself, autism has, a lot of times 70% will have ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, apraxia, a variety of other neurodivergent things, OCD, et cetera, that kind of correspond with it. I don't like to think of it as the deficits thing, but that would be the medical perception of it. Yes.
And is that maybe a different functioning of the brain, or is that I'm curious as to, and maybe you don't, maybe it's too broad of a question to ask.
Yeah.
Like more so maybe the inner workings that maybe create that, right? Or change something.
Mm-hmm.
Is it brain function? Is it I don't know if that's too broad of a question. And like I
Yeah.
said, coming into the podcast, I do like to be a little bit transparent here, right? I do like to be um, gullible in a sense of
Yeah.
like just trying to understand this at a different level, and maybe what happens to cause autism.
Oh, that is such a great question, and I wish I knew the answer to.
Yeah,
um,
and
it,
maybe it's not a fair
it is
question.
it is a neurological variation for sure. And there's a lot of variations in neurology, but autism is a neurological variation. In regards to the cause, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of theories and speculation and everything. There's never been a genetic epidemic ever in human history. So the idea that all of a sudden this is 1 in 36 kids and it's just genetics, that we are just starting to pay attention to it and it's always been there
Sure.
and we're just now diagnosing it. I feel like that dilutes and diminishes what families are experiencing, what those individuals are experiencing, because I think it's disingenuous to pretend that this has always been there and there has always been neurological variation. That part is true 100%, and what I've experienced in science and everything. I mean, even to the point that Asperger's, we don't use that word anymore because Dr. Asperger was the Nazi that was studying autistic individuals, because the Nazis themselves recognized the strengths, which is kind of a gross thing to say, but just pointing out the
No,
history.
it's
I mean, it's
right.
just real that that was something. So even at that period of time, it was taking place. Is that to say that 1 in 36 Europeans that they were studying at that time had autism? Man, I would be blown away if that was the case. Um, it seems to be that something is triggering it, whether it's genetic, whether it's some kind of external factor of the food we eat, the environment, the medicine we take, a combination of it, if we're predisposed to it. I don't know.
Right.
But I know that the theories change all the time. And so it seems to be something that, for whatever reason, a lot of us seem to experience in our kids. around 2 to 4, myself included, where, you don't really, I mean, autism in itself would qualify into that invisible disability category where it's, when your child's born, you don't see it. So it's like you're not aware of it in the sense of like, okay, there's a hand missing or a cleft palate or something that as a parent you would notice as a child is born. And even in the first stages of life where, they seem to be making facial expressions, making eye contact, and something seems to kind of change. What that is, there's all kinds of movies and documentaries about and stuff. And if they all have truth to them, maybe pieces of truth. I mean, I imagine there's pieces of truth in a lot. And what that looks like, I don't know. I just can speak to my, personal experience with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and apologies for kind of just an absolutely loaded question,
Yeah.
but
No,
you
it's
know,
all good. You didn't ask me about aliens, which I appreciate. I did a national interview the other day, and they asked me about aliens because I do space stuff for the Air Force. So thank you for not asking about aliens. You're good on that one. I appreciate it.
WrenchWay is excited to announce the launch of Tech Mission local events starting September 18th to select cities across the country. These week-long virtual events will bring together local automotive and diesel communities to empower technicians and industry professionals to express open and honest feedback about the industry, showcase shops that exemplify best practices, and to recognize individuals who are making a positive impact on the industry and their local community. Plus, we'll be giving away over $10,000 in prizes. There's no cost for technicians, service advisors, and other individuals working in the industry to participate, and all activities during the week can be completed on your own time. There are sponsorship opportunities available for shops and dealerships who want to get in front of the technicians in their area and help promote and improve the industry. Registration is free and now open. Go to WrenchWay.com, click the local chapter link, and select your city to learn more and pre-register. Link is in the show notes. One of the things that I really think is cool about you is how you chose to look at this in the positive light that it is, right? And the strengths in being able to embrace autism and being able to go down the path of saying, okay, there is a huge gap here. There are some folks that are frankly really good at certain tasks, and identifying what those tasks are so that you can put them to work. And I think being able to have that pride in doing a job and being really good at it is something that I want to maybe ask about the positive message or the positive thinking that created that. Because I think for a parent in that position, it can probably be very easy to get down on yourself. But when you kind of chose the road and the path to go the positive route, what drove that? I mean, that is such a cool and enviable thing.
Well, thanks. It wasn't always that way, to be honest with you. It definitely, the first little bit, there was absolutely a lot of self-pity, selfishness, where everything that went through my mind from I'm never going to be a grandfather, he's going to be dependent on me my entire rest of his life. Am I going to be able to go out and still have like a relationship? I mean, 80% of parents of kids with autism are divorced, myself included, right? I mean, that happens. That's a very real thing, a stressor on a lot of relationships. So what that looks like, that's really, it's tricky. But I chose to look at it in the sense, like looking at my son, I realized that, all of these people out there doing these things, they were good people. They still are good people, and they're doing amazing things. But I realized unless I didn't feel like I could look at myself and know that I did everything possible. I mean, it's one thing to throw dollars at it. And, even those kids that parents don't change their life. I mean, if their parents are throwing bucks at it too, man, they're going to be further off than, those that can't. I mean, that's just the sad reality of it. But I recognized that I just needed to, for myself, and again, that's the selfish part, right? Like, needed to be able to look at myself and be like, I have done absolutely everything for my child. And I think that's every parent out there, right? I mean, I think that parents, our kids are us. And I think, there was definitely that self part too. You're out in the park. My son's very tall. His mom her whole family's very tall, and I mean, he's taller than me. So if I was like standing up straight here in front of you, maybe 5, 10, 11, with the military uniform on and the boots. But her whole family is very, very tall. And so he's already taller than me at 14. And that's been a consistent thing when he was younger, when there's that combination of the speech delay and top of the height. Kids would come up at a playground and they'd want to talk to him. And he would try to speak, but he couldn't. And they would look confused. And as a parent, you have this weird feeling of it's somehow a reflection on you. And I don't know if that's necessarily right, but it's just true. I mean, at least I did. And so I felt like that action needed to be taken to just put everything into my kid. And, in this case with TACT, it's paid off. I don't think that happens all the time for everybody. I've been very fortunate that the ideas that we had about this, other families got behind too. I mean, it started very, very humbly. I mean, it started in the back of a 58 Chevy. Again, I'm a car guy. Figured if you're going to do this shit, man, you're going to do it right. So I put a 58 Chevy Apache on a police car frame with a 350 on 20s, some 59 Cadillac taillights, and drove around to, churches, rec centers, libraries, people's garages, community centers, anywhere that people, would give me the opportunity to try to get their kids exposed to making things, to fixing things. Because recognizing my son was good at it. At first, I thought it was just my family lineage. I mean, my great-grandfather and grandfather were Grumman guys down north of Grumman. My dad was a general contractor. So, I mean, we were always tinkering. I didn't realize until I was older that not everybody didn't know how to change their brakes or change their own oil. The idea of going to a Jiffy Lube was like, wait, what? You don't do that yourself? I am confused by this. And so it really gave me that heads up, and that the programs we started with, they were trades that I knew how to do. So it started with, the auto mechanics and welding and carpentry and electrical work, because those were things that I learned. It wasn't like a formal education, but man, I would take that education in my great-grandfather's basement and garage, or out in the field with him any day of the week, over like a formal classroom. That knowledge that they had, still to this day, I can't tell you how many days we'll be here at TACT, because I have all their tools, which has been really cool. And we use those tools. And every once in a while, you'll be working on a car and, you can't reach some freaking bolt somewhere or something. And you find some random ass wrench that your grandfather either made himself or like modified in some way that works. And you just kind of look up and you're like, yeah, okay, you're still teaching me now. So it's kind of wild how that works.
How cool. And so you go from this initial car that you're building, and I want to talk a little bit about the start of TACT and what really kind of started driving this. I'm assuming as you're doing this, you're starting to get more and more people interested in what you're doing and seeing what you're doing. And because autism reaches so many people, trying to understand maybe the impact that you had right off the bat, because I have to assume right away there's a lot of interested people.
There was, I mean, yes, and then there were a whole bunch of naysayers, a whole bunch, because still, even to this day, but especially 7 years ago, autism was viewed in that deficit, line. So we were turned down for insurance 13 times. To have 13 or
Wow.
13 insurance companies look at us and say, no, we're not going to insure this, because the idea of putting tools in kids' hands that, were, quote, disabled, they thought I was crazy, man. I mean, they looked at that like that was just, what are you thinking? And so there were a lot of parents, and definitely when we started partnering with organizations that didn't believe it was possible. And, the career path or job path for most kids with autism was hospitality, changing laundry in a hotel, maybe doing folding napkins or something at a restaurant, bagging groceries. And if that's what people want, man, God bless them. Let's help them do it. That would be amazing. If that fills their bucket, let's help them do it. But if somebody wants to turn a wrench or swing a hammer, let's find a way to help them do that and actually empower them to explore that. And so, it started at first, once parents started seeing, then it just took off like wildfire, because all the time, and I mean, it's one of my favorite parts, as you still see parents tear up and get excited in the individual themselves, because a lot of times for the first time, it's either A, that parent's seeing their kid be successful, or B, it's that first time that that individual themselves has been successful. And so like we do instrument building every year because, the music thing, like it's important to me that music still happens. And so we build guitars and ukuleles and cajones and stuff like that. And you see those kids hold up those guitars and they're just beaming with just pride and joy, and their parents too, because all they'd heard to this point is what's not going to happen for their kid in life. Like the same things that I worried about as a father, that's what they're getting. And they're living that still. And especially, when your kid's younger, there's so many services in place. The schools are loaded with those different therapies. Even if you can't swing it, man, there's schools have different things now. There's charities, there's community centered boards, there's a variety of different types of programs. The moment that child hits like 21, 22, depending upon the state, they've officially transitioned out of school or whatnot. It's like falling off a cliff, and parents are left with no resources. And schools are supposed to put together a transition plan. What does that look like for you for your future? But parents don't know that, and the teachers a lot of times don't, because they're doing their best they can, but they're overworked and underfunded. And so that kid gets to the certain age, and it's like, oh darn, like what do we do now? And I think that's where TACT comes in a lot of ways, is that we're getting in there right in that sweet spot where people are still at that age to start learning, and then kind of helping them transition into an actual career, which has been working really well.
Wow. So you're showing them the visual. How did that part go at first? Is it something that you had to get comfortable with as well, or was it just hey, like we're nailing this, like we just have to be able to get visibility to what it is that we're doing? I'm curious how that initial stage went when it went beyond your son, right? When you're starting to see those others, because that story you told about the parents seeing their kids do something, I mean, I just, I don't know. I was almost speechless at that point. I mean, that is such a cool thing.
Thanks. I mean, it's really been, that word of mouth at first is where it started. Parents were a tight knit group. We end up seeing each other in therapy, waiting rooms. So you get to know each other. And so the parents would bring their kid to TACT, or we'd go to their garage or, their church or whatnot. And then they'd have that experience. And then they'd be at a therapy center and they would tell their kid, then they would tell their therapist, hey, have you heard of this? And it's grown from that to, now we've served thousands of kids, thousands and thousands of kids. We have with camps and workshops, and we have a mobile program still. It's no longer in the cool 58 Chevy. Now it's in it's a diesel. So that's good. It's an F-250 diesel. So at least we got that going. If we did something right there too, right? And we drive around, especially a lot to like inner city schools or some of the more rural areas that kids don't get those same opportunities. And, of our career tracks program, which is our Monday through Friday, let's learn the trade and step into our career. We're really proud that we still, it's 98.5% of our families are on scholarship. We work really hard with private donors. So if anybody's listening to this and wants to donate to us, our website's builtwithtact.org, which we'd appreciate. There are companies that sponsor us like Toyota and Subaru that financially support us. There's a whole bunch of others. And we do that scholarship in the sense that we still don't want it to be something that is exclusive, where you see of all of these types of programs, and especially when it comes to trainer education, where it's like, we'll get you to this point, but it costs this amount of money. And to all of a sudden go to a family that's spending, the average in Colorado is $100,000 a year in services, and be like, hey, for another $25K, I'll get your kid a job and trained up. How do you do that? Like that's horribly exclusive at that point. And so it doesn't fulfill the mission at all. And that's not fair. So at least in my mind, as a dad, like very being mission driven and doing this as a charity, as a 501c3. And we wanted it to be that anybody that wanted to come here and learn to work had that opportunity. So, I mean, there is an application process and all those things. It's not to say that somebody could just show up off the street and be like, hey, give me a scholarship and I'll go to work. Right. But we want to make sure that if somebody's vested in their education and their training, we'll find a way to do it for them. And so we've got 80 clients that'll be in our program Monday through Friday starting next month in August, and about 100 in the waiting list. We'll do hundreds more in our camps and workshops throughout the year. And the idea is if we can get those kids exposed to it in the camps and workshops, then when they are ready to transition into that being their career, they have that opportunity to come here for that other training. Because how do you know it's something you want to do unless you've had that opportunity to experience it? And like, especially when shop classes and, auto shops are being closed all across the country in schools, makes no sense. And families are going with this crazy expensive college education. I mean, I have a master's degree. Yay, I'm glad I did it. Would I, be happy about it if it was 250,000 plus dollars in debt and no job? Ooh, when like you can go into the trades and have an incredible career with incredible people that's incredibly fulfilling, making really good money, with no debt. Where's the line here? I mean, like, it's always interesting to me too when families sometimes too, they come here and they see their kid be successful, and then all of a sudden it's like it reopens this door of what's possible for their kid. And so all of a sudden they're like, oh, it's cool they're working in this trade, but could now we do college too? And it's like, well, if you want to go to college, go do it. That's your thing. But like, they have a job. Does that still matter to you at this point? I mean, that's up to them, but it's at least nice that it gets them excited to start thinking more future forward. So
Let's talk about the training itself.
yeah.
When you have a student come in, what does training look like?
Yeah. So we call our site like a simulation site, in the sense that if you walked into our facility, which I hope some of your listeners do, or if you can make it out sometime and do it, you're welcome to. We do tours all the time. There's nothing that would indicate that this is a shop that's set up for, just autistic kids. It looks just like a regular shop. Would be some exceptions, in the sense that, our lights are LED. We don't use fluorescents. We find that fluorescent light bulbs and our kids, the frequency behind it, it doesn't help for podcasts, right, either. So same kind of thing, where our kids can be a little bit more sensitive to some things like that. Nothing's different in the tools. Nothing's different in the layout. So we're trying to immediately set them up where it's like, okay, this is what it looks like when you go out into a job site. It needs to walk like a job site, talk like a job site, all of that kind of stuff. It needs to be authentic. And so then we never have more than 6 kids per class. And we've got a skilled trades professional and a special education professional, usually an RBT or a CODA, so a registered behavioral technician or a certified occupational therapist assistant, something along those lines, that's working with the teacher to help them understand best practice too. And everything is hands-on and projects based. So from day one, when you come to TACT, you've got a tool in your hand. Obviously, there's a ton of safety stuff that we go through, where the students are, wearing safety goggles and gloves and steel-toe boots and long pants and all of those different things. But everything is project-based, and we set it up where the first few weeks, they're very small projects that guarantee results quickly. Because what we want our kids to do is feel that success from the get-go. That we want them to come in, be able to achieve something, have it be set up for success where they do it. They get that rush of like, yes, I can do this, and they want more from that. It's not lecture-based. We're not going to sit in front of our kids for 3 hours and lecture in front of a whiteboard and be like, this is the math behind electricity. Like we're not doing that. Is that important? Yes. Is that day one? Come on, no. Like we don't need to do that. So we try to set that up, and then we kind of roll it into harder projects as we keep going. And we use what we call deception without deceit a lot, in the sense that it's very, very easy, especially when it's 6 kids per class, to set up projects that achieve the same set of skills, but it's yet a differentiated project. So it gives the kid the illusion, if you will, of like, oh, I have independence over what I am choosing to do. But at the end of the day, I'm still learning how to read a tape measure, understand what volume is, understand how, electricity works, a variety of different things. And then at the end of it, we try to do those first few projects where it's something tactile that they can take home and show off. So we want, like in, carpentry class, they're going to build not birdhouses. We don't do birdhouses, but simpler projects where they can walk away with and feel successful.
I think there's a lot of lessons there that just traditional schools could learn as well from that, with the getting early success and how important that is for the confidence of anybody. But I love the way that you start that. I think that's so important. And you had mentioned it earlier in the podcast that oftentimes that might be the first time they're doing something like that, right? And to get that confidence so early has to be such a good start to a momentum snowball to kind of keep them going.
That's the idea. Yeah. I mean, that's the idea. I mean, they deserve that. That's a, success. And we're teaching for them. I mean, by and large, there are still educators out there that are teaching for themselves. And, they have their place too. But like, we're all doing this for these kids to be successful. And it needs to be about them and setting them up for success. It doesn't need to be about us, like reassuring to ourselves what a great freaking teacher we are. We, as humans, if that's the kind of person that wants a teacher, we don't want them here, because it's not about them. It's about our kids. And so we try to really set them up in that. We do like a safety huddle every day too. Again, we're trying to simulate that, right? And then, like, for example, in the auto shop with the Toyota and Subaru curriculums, we have access to all of that because Toyota and Subaru are great. And so they have that where our kids go through, they have all of that documentation. And the neat thing about those companies is when you're taking all those tests and getting those certs, it follows you your entire career. So when they step into those dealerships then, or private shop or whatever, that goes with them. And so they're learning all of that. We've got it set up where we're, using the rotary lifts that are the same as what they'd have in the shop, where everything is simulated in an actual shop. It's the same stuff. So we can do the same, curriculum with the same tools on the same cars. And then our staff then goes with them once we place them into a job. We have our employment specialists that are working there with them. It's alleviating those transition points, because those transition points create a lot of anxiety for kids with autism, as they do any individual. I mean, I'm sure you remember that, rush or that feeling you get on your first day at a new job. It provokes anxiety. Yeah, so much. It's like, oh, like, what is this feeling? And our kids get that too, but a lot of times, stereotypically, it could be a little bit more extreme. So we want to try to alleviate that. So if it's the same tools, the same curriculum, same cars, same part of our staff, only thing that's changed at that point is a new environment. We only changed one factor. Then, okay, they're doing that with just that one thing. Then we can start moving out some of the other pieces, and it's just transitioning it in a smooth way. Where, I mean, the goal of, traditional education isn't to get a job. It's just to get that piece of paper, right? That's all they care about. The certification, the degree. They wipe their hands and they're done. They don't really care I say they don't care, that's not really accurate. It's not their goal, I should say, is for you to, have a job at that point. Their goal is for you to finish, essentially. Our finish is, they've been placed into a career, they have a career, and then it goes all the way through, right? When we're measuring it for years, we want them to have that. We're 20 years from now, they retire, or 30 years, or whatever it is. And right, they have that same opportunity. I mean, likewise, we teach kids to quit, because that's a skill they need to learn how to do too. I mean, that's not also taught in most schools, but with what we're doing comes that level of self-advocacy, and like, our kids need to have the ability to be like, I don't like the way you're talking to me. That's not okay. You know what I mean? This isn't a place, advocating for yourself. I mean, I don't know about you, but I was never taught how to quit.
No.
And geez, that when you first go in and actually do that, that's really hard. I mean, when you think about employers today, they're like, oh, employees just ghost us. And it's like, well, yeah, they've never been taught they don't learn that. Their parents aren't teaching them. Schools aren't teaching them. They don't know what to do. So they just walk.
What a good point. I never thought about that in my life, but that is a really, really good point.
Did you know WrenchWay provides a number of free solutions for high schools and post-secondary schools with automotive or diesel programs? WrenchWay's website makes it easy for instructors to work with shops and dealerships in their area. Instructors can request resources from local industry like tool and equipment donations, shop tours, advisory committee members, and more. Instructors can also use WrenchWay's website to help educate students and parents about what it's like to work in the industry. WrenchWay's Top Shops pages are a great way to show students and parents what it's actually like to work at different shops in the area. Shops are required to disclose important information like compensation ranges for all levels, detailed benefits information, and more. Learn more about WrenchWay and sign up for a free account at wrenchway.com/solutions/schools. Link is in the show notes.
I'm interested in learning about that communication side too, right? And you had mentioned the transition specialists, and I think that is extremely unique and really helpful. When you take one of your students out of that kind of comfort zone of the school and are putting them into a shop, how do you arm them with the communication skills? I mean, to go as in depth as how to quit, I
Mm-hmm.
think is so neat. I mean, like just in general, I think it's such a well-rounded way to teach somebody. Uh, I have to imagine there's more to that communication skill from the student's end as well. Just being
Mm-hmm.
able to know that you're going into a different environment, and maybe there are threats of somebody, not being the kindest to you or something like
Yeah.
that.
Which
Is there anything
happens.
you can do to combat that in terms of maybe, is it prepping the crew that you're about to have them intermingle with? Is it
Yeah.
trying to get them to understand, walk me through that just a little bit.
Yeah. So, our employment specialists, when they go out there and they're working side by side, and we cover the insurance for those individuals, they're also, talented in the trades. They're actually acting like that liaison. So at the same time that they're supporting our client, they're training our staff on what their communication needs to look like. Going back to that communication piece, the neat thing about the trades is because English as a second language is already kind of by and large been embraced in a lot of the different trades we teach. They've already set up what in the autism world we call a task analysis. It already exists in most trades in the sense that it's a step-by-step breakdown of how to do X, Y, and Z task. A lot of times it's even already color-coded because they didn't have a way to communicate it in the past in English, for example. And so they already have those kind of procedures. Where we come up with our staff is we're teaching them the specificity, and then two, helping their staff to know that our kids, when they're graduating with that social piece of it, they're not going to be the ones, again, I'm stereotyping here, that at least at first don't want to go into the the waiting room or the break room and talk about what they did at the bar last night, what concert they were at, what the girl was wearing that they saw down the street. They're not talking about those things. What they're talking about is what they want to do, and the work piece is the break for them. The break, it's reversed, where it's like that social piece in between that creates the anxiety.
Mm.
So helping them see that, where our kids aren't trying to be rude. So a lot of time, and they're very direct, which I personally really appreciate. My family's from the East Coast, so it's like when your family's from the East Coast, you kind of appreciate the directness. Other parts of the country might not so as much, and it's not meant mean. There's the old joke, like if you're back in New York, where my family's from originally, if your tire gets a flat, and you're on the side of the road, this is again, I apologize for the broad brush here, but that person that's helping you change your tire, they're going to be insulting you while they're changing your tire. Like, I can't believe you don't know how to do this yourself. And they're changing your tire for you at the same time. And they don't mean it to be rude. It's just like, that's how it is. Like it's not like a knock, but that language, how do you get that across? Our, kids, they know so much, they have so much talent. They'll look at something, and like, especially in the auto world, a lot of our kids, man, they're like, they know everything. We'll walk to like a classic car shop, and they'll look at a 40s Plymouth and be like, no, that's wrong, that piece. And they know all of those details, and they're not trying to like knock the salesman and be like, hey, what you're selling is disingenuous, but it's just like they're stating a fact of what they know. And so training people to be like, hey, maybe take it with a grain of salt and be like, I can learn something, that lifelong learner, rather than like you're personally being attacked. I mean,
Yeah.
a story that I like to tell, where, we work with Coors, they're one of our business partners, and they hired one of our graduates, and she's working on the line canning beer. And they pay like really well. It's like over $30 an hour for our grads to like go can beer at Coors in the factory here, and which is super cool. And she's doing that as her job, and she notices something. And on day one, she goes to the management at Coors and tells them that they're doing something wrong. And I mean, to think about the courage, that's the best word when he was on a
Guts.
podcast here. Yeah, to say something like that to Coors, like, you're canning beer wrong. Come on. But she was right. And she noticed something that they could do that actually made them more efficient. And they actually, to their credit, listened to it and were like, oh my gosh, how did we miss that? And ended up like listening to her, made the changes, and then they called us and they're like, we want more of your graduates. That's amazing. But
Wow.
to their credit, I mean, kudos to whoever that manager was that didn't be like, oh, this person yet again is going to tell me what I don't know. You know what I mean? But actually had the open mindedness and the lifelong learning to like look at it and be like, wow, this person's right. I think everybody could do better with that, right? I mean, there's a lot of ego that gets involved with a lot of people, especially when they know something where they feel like they're closed to learning something else off. I mean, Temple that we talked about earlier, that's her gig. I mean, she teaches at the university and she travels around all kinds of factories and stuff and walks through and looks at what they're doing and uses her talent to show them how to do it better. And at the end of the day, I mean, isn't that what businesses want? Don't they want to make more money, have more staff retention, keep them safer, keep them healthier? That's what they want. But at the same token, they then need to be open to those blunt conversations without like the little fluff that goes on to make them feel good and be told again what a great company they are. So
Let's talk about the communication side from, if maybe you're that shop out there that might be considering this and maybe looking at putting a program together. Any advice to the general public on communication skills as it relates to working with somebody with autism?
yeah, I think we live in a very fear-based culture now where everybody's afraid to offend everybody. Um, it's not offensive to go to somebody and in a non-diminutive way or diminishing way to say, ask them a question. It's about the way that you present it, the way you talk about it. So like the communication piece, it's two-sided, right? Everything in life is two-sided. There's always two sides to the story. So being very specific and asking questions in a non-punitive way. Then there's ways that people can ask questions where it's like, oh, you mean you can't do this by yourself? Where it's like, that's not really a question. That's just being an asshole. Like asking the question of like, hey, how can I help set you up for success with this? This is the way I've done it. What do you need? And like being open to those kind of things and knowing that at first, honestly, it's going to take more. And that's what we're trying to do at TACT, is to alleviate some of that transition. It is going to take longer at first. It would be disingenuous if I'm talking about our incredible community and saying like it's this magically talented community that does everything perfect and everybody's just missed it. There are hurdles that go with it. So recognizing that, but investing also that knowing that yes, it's going to go a little slower at first, but it's going to end up in the long run go so much faster, because once they know it, our kids are so routine oriented and so task oriented that once they've learned the procedures, they don't deviate from the procedures. So that's, again, one thing you want. So, and then again, the specificity of the language, just being very specific, like, hey, I need you to sweep up the shop. What does that mean, sweep up the shop? Like, just being very clear. And it's not a big thing to ask them to be like, okay, you want them to clean at the end of the day or whatever, like you do in any auto shop, right? Or you bring out the Zambonis and you're cleaning out the oil or whatever you got going on in your shop. Being very direct and specific, like, and then not giving a bunch of tasks at once where it's like, okay, I need you to sweep up this portion here, put it into a dustpan, and then dump it into the garbage can. Come back to me when you're done. Don't give like this laundry list of instructions verbally. And you can write it down and create checklists and stuff, but by and large, just those, direct things would be a good starting spot. I think if people started there and then the universal design behind it with what's going to work for them works for everybody. So don't be specific with the kid with autism and then non-specific with the, neurotypical kid. Treat everybody the same. Like if the autistic kid needs those directions, most likely the neurotypical kid does too. Just treat everybody equally, because the neurotypical is going to benefit from that too.
It's similar. I was with a business at one point. We went through the ISO process of ISO 9001 certification and chronicling everything that goes into a process and being able to bring it together. I think it's very labor intensive, but it's also like super helpful in being able to lay out a process. And I think you could learn some things as a leader through a process like that.
Oh, I mean, the military, they've got it like when I'm in the Air Force and, doing my thing and have like my uniform on, like my shoelaces have to be tied a certain way and tucked into my boots a certain way. Like it's very specific, and it alleviates so much because it's like all the details are there. There's no question at that point. Yeah.
What kind of area do you cover? Do you have clients from across the country? Are you give me an idea of what kind of geographic range you cover.
So right now it's mainly just the Denver metro and surrounding counties. We're going to expand, and that's our growth plan within the next year for sure. But we have families, since we haven't been able to grow yet across the country, we have families that move all over here. And part of that has been, it's again, like we talked about, a good kind of bookend to where we started, is that relationship piece. Like these businesses have embraced us because of that relationship at first, where they're recognizing our staff is authentic and genuine, and they're willing because of that to listen to our kids. And then once they see that, they recommend us to others. If we were to go to Maine or Idaho or Texas or Washington or whatever, we don't have those relationships with those businesses yet. So we could train the kids the same way that we're training them here, but without a place for them to actually go to at that point. It's hard to get somebody trained up and ready to go without a final destination. Then it's just a school or a training facility at that point. So developing those relationships is one of our hurdles for really growing, where we can hopefully, as we expand, find more like-minded people out there. I think it'll happen. It'll take
What's
time.
your vision? What's your vision for this? This is such an amazing thing, what you're doing here. And I have a feeling this is going to impact a lot of people. What do you see the future of TACT being?
I think, in my loftiest of dreams, I hope it serves as a model of training and really transitioning all across the country. I think if we can change the narrative, it's still a 90% unemployment rate. If TACT somehow grows nationally and moves the needle to 87%, we will have done more than any other program in the last 50 years, 30 years, whatever. And to think that started, from the inspiration of an incredible boy that, has changed my life for the better. What kind of other legacy could you leave? That will be a better legacy than any record I ever played on or any artist. That'll have a much bigger impact.
Wow. The meaning and the purpose behind this is so impactful to me, and just hearing your story and the story of your son, Dylan, and what you've done with this is incredible. And I know I've kind of said that throughout the podcast, but I do think this is very touching. And I do think this is something that puts a lot of things into perspective. And it's just such a enviable project that you've taken on. And I think the success that you're going to have is just a matter of time. I think this is going to keep coming. I think the interest in it will keep coming. And the more you're identifying the strengths of the autism community and being able to shine a light on it and highlight all the great things that an individual is doing while having autism is awesome. Just so motivational and so cool.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to share with the listeners. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
How do people get involved? How do people learn more? I know you mentioned the website earlier, but I have a feeling there's going to be people that are interested in trying to get involved. What's the best way to go about it?
So our website is buildwithtact.org, and TACT is like Tango Alpha Charlie Tango, so TACT. So buildwithtact.org. Check that out. We've got a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page. I think that would be a great way. And there's all kinds of ways for people to donate cars, donate their time, donate their finances, for businesses to get involved with hiring our graduates and not just from the Denver area. So, we have donors from actually all over the country, because, it's grandparents in Nebraska, that want those kind of opportunities one day for their grandkids. So, and then too, people reaching out, all of our contact information, we're very open and transparent. We work with a bunch of other groups to help them learn, we don't say best practice, but we'll learn from what we've learned. And so there's contact information there with phone numbers and emails if they want to reach out, of helping us, with new business partners or opportunities for our graduates. That would be great.
For all of you listeners out there, I would encourage you to go check it out. See if you can help. If you're impacted, if your family's impacted with autism, check it out. You could make such an impact on somebody's life by just being present and being involved and really trying to do something different, which is what you're doing in spades, Danny. I really appreciate you being on today.
Thank you so much. I had a blast. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Jay.
That wraps up this week's episode of Beyond the Wrench. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode. As a reminder, don't forget to rate and follow Beyond the Wrench on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us get Beyond the Wrench in front of other fantastic shop owners, managers, technicians, and dealers just like you, so we can continue to help improve, promote, and grow this amazing industry. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back next week.